Hi folks, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Natasha and I do book things here. Today's video is another installment of my Stephen King Sunday. This one I am going to be reviewing The Shining. Do want to give you guys just a heads up. Yes, I did cut my hair off. I just grabbed kitchen scissors and just hacked it off. Bottom parts were kind of dead. I realize now that when I wear it with the part, I kind of look like little Tay. I am just gonna, you know, let it do its thing. Also, the lighting in this video is atrocious because if I were to turn off my sort of yellow overhead lights, it's just too dark outside right now and like dreary and rainy. You wouldn't even see me in this room. So, as usual, I'm going to break this video down into sections for those of you who are interested in different parts. First part is going to be fun facts regarding Stephen King and this book, writing this book, that sort of thing. That's sort of like the research part of this that I love to do. I think it's super fun to find out why an author wrote a book, what inspired it, da-da-da-da-da. Then I'm going to talk about my own personal experience with this book, if I read it before, what I sort of knew about it going in, any sort of ties I had to the book before reading it this time. Then I'm going to give you the themes of the book, give you a little bit of a brief overview, and then I'm going to get into a discussion where there will be more spoilers and things that happen in the book. So if you guys are interested in that, then just keep watching. We're going to get into some fun facts. I have like about 1,000 pages of notes about this, so if you see me referencing my notes, it's because I have a lot of them. So The Shining was published in 1977. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of fun facts about why Stephen King wrote this book, where his sort of mind was at when writing this. There's a lot known about The Shining and a lot of it ties into the movie adaptation by Kubrick. I'm going to try my best to sort of separate the movie from this as much as I can because I feel like the movie definitely needs to have its own video because that is one of the things that a lot of people only know about The Shining is the movie, not the book, and that was definitely sort of my case with it. So I'm trying to separate the two of them and then talk more about Stephen King and his opinion of The Shining, the movie, in my next video. So his two previous books were Carrie and Salem's Lot, both of which sort of center in small towns. He was definitely looking for a bit of a change of pace for his third book. So him and Tabitha, his wife, basically pulled out a map and he kind of just pointed and landed in Boulder, Colorado. That's where they decided to check into the now sort of famous Stanley Hotel. That is the hotel that inspired the Overlook, which is the hotel in The Shining. Definitely inspired by, but not identical to. And it's really interesting because if you actually go on YouTube, a lot of people that I like watching, like Shane Dawson, have actually gone to the Stanley Hotel to do sort of like investigation. So they actually checked into the hotel on October 30th, 1974. It has been rumored that the hotel is haunted. The night that they went, they were actually the only people staying there because the hotel was really close to closing for the season. So they were the only guest in this haunted hotel. It is still known to be haunted. Definitely, probably even more so given the popularity of The Shining, which is really kind of neat for their sort of like tourist kind of thing. It's definitely a place that I would like to go, but apparently the wait list to get into the room that Stephen King stayed in, which is room 217, is like months and months and months and stuff like that, and probably a lot of money. So yeah, so they ended up staying in room 217, the most haunted reported room, which definitely directly influenced room 217 in The Shining. So very interesting. That's the room that the family stays in when they move in. So they stayed at the hotel. They definitely did a lot of wandering, and they, you know, it really stuck with him sort of like how eerie the long corridors and hallways were. And then they decided to get dinner. They only had one dinner option because as mentioned, they were like just about to close, and so they literally brought down the chairs from the table so that they could sit in this grand dining room to eat their dinner, and all the other tables had the chairs up. Definitely influences some scenes in this where they're like the only people staying in the Overlook Hotel. So just before they ended up going to the Stanley Hotel, King was writing a book about a boy who was psychic and had ESP, so that definitely was in his mind as well, sort of going and staying at this hotel, trying to come up with his third book. So he's been quoted as saying that everything sort of perfectly lined up, and by the time that he went to bed, he basically had an idea of this novel in his head already, and then he went to sleep. And that night he had some like really horrible dreams. He dreamt that his son at the time, which I believe would have been Owen. I think Owen is older than Joe. Don't quote me on that. But Owen was about 3 years old, and King dreamt that a fire hose from the hotel was chasing his son through the corridors, which is really important. Again, like it's just really neat when like authors include those like funny little moments of things that happen that influence the novel that are like directly in this. So yeah, so like all those things combined, he's been quoted as saying it was just this perfect mix and the novel just sort of happened there. At the time, he gave himself 3,000 words a day to write, and he has since then said that he lowers it typically to about 2,000 as he's in his 60s at the time that the introduction was written for this, which I find really interesting because I personally can't imagine writing 3,000 words in a day. I know that a lot of people here do it, a lot of authors that I know. Julie, I think, typically gives herself 2,000 words, sometimes more to write, which again, like, as somebody who struggled, I don't want to say struggled, but definitely had like hard time with motivation writing that, it's just neat to see sort of like that's his word count that he gave himself every day. So that's a couple of fun facts in regards to the book. There are definitely a lot of fun facts with the movie. I could probably do a whole video just about fun facts regarding the movie, but that is sort of the fun facts that I have with the book. And definitely, if you're in the market for checking out the room that he stayed in, do watch Shane Dawson's video where he goes to the Shining Hotel. It's the Stanley Hotel, and he does sort of like a fun investigation. They get all freaked out and stuff. Do check that out if you want a little bit of backstory as to where Stephen King stayed, because I was really interested and loved that video series. So moving on to my own personal ties with this book, I definitely believe I read this at some point in my childhood and my teenage years. I don't know necessarily though if I remember finishing it, and here's why. Because I am definitely one of those people that was highly influenced by the Kubrick film. I've watched Shining like 10 times at least, something like that. It used to be one of my favorite movies. However, now sort of growing up, doing a lot more research about the movie, realizing that King actually hates the movie adaptation, and then now reading this book as an adult, I can see that I was definitely influenced by the movie about what my opinions are about the book, or like I definitely use the movie as this is what happens in the book, and it's not. It's very, very different, very, very much different. All you have is the movie to base your sort of thoughts about what the book is about. Definitely stay tuned for my spoilers at the end. I know Clara has watched the movie and hasn't finished the book, so you definitely watch this, because I'm going to tell you what happens at the end of the book, and it's so much more interesting. Definitely a case of the book is better, and so that was my own sort of personal experience going in, was knowing what I knew about the movie, having seen it so many times, and then what little I remembered from the book that I read. Alright, so I'm going to talk a bit about the spoiler-free overview of the book. Now, it may seem like a little bit of spoilers, but I feel like, again, like Carrie, like Salem's Lot, a lot of us know what happens in The Shining. I feel like it's one of those things in pop culture that we see, but again, a lot of it is based on the movie. So this follows the Torrance family, a family of 3. You have the dad, Jack Torrance, you have the mom, Wendy, and then you have the little boy, Danny. It follows them as they move into the Overlook Hotel, where Jack is supposed to be a caretaker for this hotel and make sure that everything is running okay, make sure that the boiler stays at a certain temperature or level, and just sort of hunker down in this hotel and make sure it doesn't explode, essentially, for the winter. So in the winter, it basically gets snowed in. They are stuck there until the snow melts in the spring. Something that I am sort of familiar with just living in Canada. I think I have more of a tie to understanding what it's like to be snowed in. So Wendy and Jack and the family itself are sort of on the rocks as they move into this this hotel. They're sort of using the hotel as a last resort to sort of patch up their family life and make sure that like Wendy and Jack stay together. Jack does have sort of a past of abuse and alcoholism, so that definitely plays into how the story unfolds once they're in the hotel. So a lot of us are familiar with Danny. Danny is the little boy. He's 5 years old in the book, and he has ESP and sort of like psychic abilities. He's able to see what happens and what's going to happen. He sort of communicates as well with the spirits and things in the hotel, because the hotel itself has a past and has spirits and ghosts and monsters and whatever. And he is definitely sensitive to these things. So as the story continues, they are in the hotel. The hotel definitely messes with their minds, with all 3 of them really, and you sort of continue through to find out what happens at the end, which I will include in my spoilers. So that's basically what happens. It's sort of cabin fever isolation in this hotel with this family that definitely has some issues, and sort of how being isolated messes with them and how the hotel messes with them. I'm going to talk about a couple of themes as well if you guys are curious. There's a couple things that this book talks about. So there's definitely a theme of family connection. The Overlook is sort of their last chance at being a family unit. There is a theme of violence sort of all throughout, sort of Jack's past, his violence towards Danny and Wendy, as well as the violence from the spirits in the hotel as well. It's sort of a theme all throughout. So if you're uncomfortable with any sort of violence like that, just keep that in mind. There's definitely the theme of the supernatural, which is common in most of King's work. With this, Danny has ESP, what they call the shining. He shines and other people shine, so that's where the title The Shining comes from, if you guys weren't aware of that. And he's sensitive to existing activity in the hotel. Just sort of the general theme of isolation. You get sort of the cabin fever and the actual physical isolation of being in the hotel by themselves, but you do get mental isolation from each individual character. Danny not really being able to, at 5 years old, express what he's feeling and seeing and whatnot with his ESP. Wendy just not really being able to communicate with Jack very well. Jack not being able to communicate with the family and everything. There's a lot of communication and sort of mental isolation in this book. Alright, so all that together, that sort of is the non-spoiler part of The Shining. Now I'm going to get into things that I like, a little bit more spoiler things, so if you guys don't want to know how this book ends, or any more sort of deeper things that happen in the book that could potentially be a spoiler for you, stop watching here, but if you want to know, stay with it. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers coming up now. So reading this as an adult, somebody who has mostly watched the movie, the number one thing that surprised me about this as I started reading it was the fact that Wendy is a main character. A lot of the times I didn't think that she was a main character, or I saw her as weak. In the book, she's definitely not. She's way more strong and just kind of badass in the book than, you know, you're sort of led to believe by pop culture. I feel like a lot of people just sort of assume that she's the weak, screaming lady in the freaking movie, whereas in the book, she does sort of hold her own. She is kind of an idiot in certain scenarios, though. Like, she definitely does the horror thing where, you know, she really should just stay in one spot, but she's like, oh no, I'll go explore. Yeah, no, I think that's just horror writing in general. But I think the number one thing that I took away just from the whole book and the ending was the fact that, like, Wendy is a badass. I'm just gonna go ahead and spoil you guys for the ending of this book. The ending of this basically ends up with Jack not taking care of the boiler and the entire hotel exploding in flames, and fire catches on fire with Danny and Wendy, like, last second being able to escape because Danny sends, like, ESP brainwaves to another man who has ESP brainwaves, and they get the fuck out of Dodge. However, of course, just before they get out of Dodge, Jack is trying to kill them because REDRUM. He is sort of attacking Wendy with a mallet. Again, very different if you're familiar with the movie. He does attack her with a mallet. There's a very big scene on the stairs as she's trying to get away. Just a sort of heads up of things that Wendy goes through. Let's see here. By the end, she has broken ribs, her ear gets torn off, she has a pretty much like busted broken leg, and several shattered vertebrae where he beats her with the mallet. It's way more graphic in violence in the book, and I'm not saying that I like it, but I preferred the book in just the discussions of violence and the shit that goes down. It's very very intense to read, and kind of, if you know the story sort of already, it's more fun to read. You know, it really puts Wendy in this scenario of like, holy shit, how the fuck is she gonna get out with like a broken back, a broken leg, her ear fucking ripped off and shit, broken ribs, and she managed to get herself and Danny out. It's just way better ending in this than what you're probably familiar with. For that alone, I suggest that you do read the book, because the ending... Also, I feel like a lot of people will ask, is it scary? The book is definitely scary in certain parts. Again, I was familiar with the story and sort of knew what to expect, but I feel like if you didn't know what to expect, there are certain parts in this that are very scary. There's the woman in the bathtub, and yep, that's scary. There's definitely some parts where you're reading from Jack's perspective and Danny's perspective of this ghost woman, and it's spooky. I'm not gonna lie, it's very spooky. Also, a part that I forgot completely about was the fact that the hedge animals, like the big decorated hedge guys, there's rabbits and a lion, I think, and something else, a dog or something, they come alive, and they are very sort of like eerie and scary, and they're like alive hedge animals. I feel like no one talks about, even when they review the book or the movies or anything, they don't talk about these gigantic, scary, moving hedge animals and how fucking terrifying that would be. So I feel like the rest of the book, though, is pretty in tune with what we're familiar with, what I knew. It was definitely interesting to read the book and understand sort of more about Jack's character, the fact that he was abused as a boy, which is why he has anger problems and has shown certain signs of abuse to Danny now, which it makes sense. It's just, you get a little bit more of Jack's character. I feel like by the end of the book you really have related to him and you connect with him, because he's trying to do good, and he just, you know, is influenced by his past and also by the presence of the hotel itself, is influencing him to basically murder Wendy and Danny. Yeah, which is sad, but it happens. There's also a really, really beautiful moment. This is a huge spoiler. As Jack is in this sort of murderous rage, there is 1 second where he breaks it and he basically tells Danny, like, get out. Like, I love you, get out of here. As, you know, he has this sort of moment of being human again, and just is like, you know, I love you, get out of here, because I'm going to kill you otherwise. I feel like that moment just really sort of made it feel like a real person, even though there's all these sort of supernatural elements and whatnot going on. Like, that, all that sort of surprised me, again, coming from my own personal opinion and what I knew about the book. These little things that I forgot about, or that I sort of just tie into the movie. I kind of can't really review this without saying what I thought I knew about it. All these other little things, the ending, big surprise for me, because I completely forgot the fiery explosion ending. Wendy being a fucking badass, I completely forgot about that. Danny, you know, using his ESP to get them out at the last second, sending for help, if you will. Forgot about that. Forgot about Jack's sort of last moment where he's a human being. All these things in that is what makes the book so much better than the movie, and just sort of like, you know, makes the book a fantastic book. And the reason, though, why I ended up giving this a 4 and not a 5 is that there's a little bits in this that really just pissed me off. I think I talked with Chelsea about it, which I think she gave it a 3. The adults in this are stupid. The adults to a certain level are dumb when it comes to what Danny is going through and Danny's ESP. Like, you have him saying red rum, red rum, red rum 1,000 fucking times, and they know he has this, like, you know, somewhat psychic ability, and yet no one put together that red rum is murder. Now, I get it, because we're so used to knowing that red rum is murder that they're like, oh, red rum, do you mean red drum? It's like, no, bitch. No, it's that part really sort of irritated me, because I feel like they didn't sit down and really listen to him enough to go, hey buddy, like, what's going on here? That, literally the whole red rum, do you mean red drum, is in this book, and I laughed. I had to laugh. It took me out of the book for a second, because I was like, how are they so stupid, you know? This is another King book that has a lot of racist language in it as well. There's like, oh man, by the end, there's just some like language that I didn't even feel comfortable reading, and like even having the words go in my brain as I'm reading them, I'm like, ugh, things that are just horrible to read. And yeah, so like I can't in good conscience give this book a 5 just because of that. Like I just, it upsets me on such a deep personal level, and I understand that King himself is not outwardly racist, but in his earlier work especially, he does use racism as like a bad guy trope. Like, this guy is a bad guy, or he is now evil because he talks like this, which I can understand, but I don't like. I think there's so many better ways to distinguish that someone is a bad guy than to have them use this language towards people of color, whatever. It's rough to read, so do just know that. Yeah. Overall, I gave it a 4. I think if all you are is familiar with the movie and you're kind of like, give the book a solid try. At the very least, get to a part, you know, the last 100 pages or so, just to like get to that escalation of violence, really understand where Jack's mind was, and then the amazing ending where Wendy is just a fucking badass and gets herself out of that whole situation. I think this is amazing in having a woman in horror actually survive, and I know that sounds bad, but that's just kind of how it is. I think that having her survive in the end and having her, you know, save her kid as well is just amazing. That is my overall sort of review of The Shining. Again, it's hard for me to talk about this without mentioning the movie, but do read the book. The book is just so much better and very different, so just read it. I suggest it. It is a little bit spooky though, I'm not gonna lie. There's parts of this, if you're sensitive to scary things, if you don't like that sort of like heart moving feeling of like, what's happening, it might not be for you. Also, there is a lot of violence in this, so do keep that in mind. But overall, I do suggest it. Is it my favorite Stephen King book? No, but it is up there, and I'm definitely looking for more gore and violence at this level in his further work. That is my Stephen King Sunday, all about The Shining. Next week, I am going to talk more about the movie, just because it's so important to talk about the movie. Again, in comparison to this, I have a lot of thoughts about that. That's going to be an equally long video, I'm sure. If you guys like this video, please let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know any discussions about the book in particular in the comments, and yeah, I'll get back to you and read them and enjoy them. I love having discussions, so until my next video, I will talk to all of you soon. Bye!